the question of like, what if things had been different is the most fascinating question to ask, both in terms of your personal life. I'm sure there are moments where you can think that had things turned out slightly differently, everything would look different today. There's another way of also asking what if, and that's in terms of history. There's so many very profound what if questions. What if Britain had listened to Winston Churchill in the 30s when Hitler was building up his power, and they would have responded with force? Maybe, who knows what would have happened? What if in 1947, when the United Nations voted for the establishment of the State of Israel, what happens if the vote would have gone another way? And it was one of the only moments in history where the Soviet Union and the United States voted in the same direction on the same issue. What if JFK had survived his assassination and Ronald Reagan had not survived it? Like, how would the world have looked completely different? And there's so many of these questions one could ask. And by doing that, we forces us to relook at history. The amazing thing is, on the night of the Seder, we begin with one of the most profound what-if questions. You know, how does the Seder begin? Right at the beginning of the Seder, we say, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, avadim hayinu lefaro b'Mitzrayim, and then it says, ve'ilu lo hotzia kadosh baruch hu et avoteinu b'Mitzrayim. What if God had not taken us out of Egypt? Then we would still be there. Then none of Jewish history would ever have happened. It's the greatest what if, because it means, what if we would never have been taken out and we would have just remained in slavery? Then nothing that happened in Jewish history would have happened. Because we wouldn't have come out, we wouldn't have received the Torah, we wouldn't have gone into Israel, there would not have been a Jewish people. It's the craziest way to actually start the Seder night, by saying, what if none of this would have happened? Then we wouldn't be here tonight. And in fact, the commentators challenge it. They ask this question, what do you mean, what if the Jewish people hadn't gone out of Egypt? God promised that we would go out of Egypt. But the Budraham, one of our commentators, classic commentators on the Seder and the Haggadah, he actually says, had the people not brought themselves back, in other words, there was even though God had promised it, but the people were assimilating, they were losing their sense of Jewishness. Had they gone over the edge on that, maybe we wouldn't have made it out. That Hashem's promise was dependent on the people maintaining their basic sense of Jewish identity. But most commentators do not go as far as that. They say God promised that it was going to happen. The Ritva says, what does the question mean? What if? It means, what if God had not made the promise? Then we would not have gotten out by virtue of our own deeds. We did not deserve to leave Egypt. And he says that's what it means. What if God would not have taken us out? What if he wouldn't have made the promise? Then we wouldn't have made it out, because we did not deserve to leave Egypt. We were a nation that had assimilated into Egyptian culture. People were worshipping idols, and on our own merit, we would not have made it out. Now, why does the Haggadah start with this thought experiment, which is essentially this amazing thought experiment? What if none of this would have happened? And I think part of it is because the night has to start, and the key theme of the night is gratitude. And gratitude is driven by considering the fact, two things gratitude is driven by. Number one, we didn't deserve this. Number two, it could have been different. Those are the two elements of gratitude, and therefore starting it in this way. Now, the starting point of the Seder is, what if God had not promised? We wouldn't have made it out because we didn't deserve it, which means we did not deserve to be saved in Egypt. And here's an amazing thing. The translation of the word Pesach, we always translate as Passover, because it comes from the verse, because God passed over the houses of the Jews and went to the houses of the Egyptians when the plague of the death of the firstborn, and he saved the firstborn in the houses of the Jews. He passed over their homes. Why does that end up being the name of the festival? Out of all the names you could choose, of course there were 10 plagues, there was splitting of the sea, there was the Exodus, there were so many different dimensions to what was taking place. Why is that the focus? So Targum Onkelos, the ancient translation of the text, which is a translation that goes back all the way to Mount Sinai, it's the Aramaic translation, the most accurate translation that we have, says that the word Pesach does not mean God passed over, it means he had compassion. He felt sorry for us, he had mercy on us. There's a very big difference between passing over and having mercy. Mercy means we didn't deserve it. We were saved by the good grace of God. And in fact, when the Egyptians were drowning in the ocean, according to the Midrash, at the miracle of the splitting of the sea, when the Egyptians were drowning in the ocean, the angels said to God, on what merit have you saved the Jews and you have drowned the Egyptians? These worship idols and these worship idols. Why have you saved them? And God's answer is, this is the promise that I made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Their children would go into this land, they would be enslaved, and I would bring them out, because this is part of Hashem's plan. And so what that reminds us, on the beginning of the night of the Seder, we are here by the grace of Hashem. And had that not been, we wouldn't be here. It was not through our own efforts. And so the gratitude begins with realizing it's something that we don't deserve. That applies also in relationships. The killer of gratitude is when a person thinks, this is something that I deserve. If a wife, husband help one another, you say, well, that's because you're married, so you have to do that for me. The moment you look at another person and you say, you have to do that for me. When a child looks to a parent and says, you have to do this for me, or a parent says to a child, you have to honor me, the moment you're in a relationship where you feel this is owed to you, that extinguishes gratitude. Gratitude in a relationship comes from the fact, you don't owe me. It's true. It's true that we're family. It's true that we have a relationship. It's true that I've done things for you, but I feel that I don't deserve it. And when you do for me, I feel a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude comes from a feeling of, this is not something that I'm entitled to. Entitlement and gratitude are the very opposite. And the beginning of the Seder makes the statement against entitlement. We were not entitled to be saved. We had the grace of Hashem, and therefore we thank, and that's why it starts on that note. But there's something else about gratitude. Gratitude is when you don't take something for granted. And this is the hardest thing about gratitude. One extinguisher of gratitude is when you think I'm entitled to it. The other is when you assume, well, this just is what it is. Like the Gemara says, I'll give you an example. It says we should be grateful to Hashem for every breath of air that we take. I'll call neshima v'neshima. We don't take, but it's so easy to take breathing for granted, because you're just doing it all the time, and it's there. But gratitude is saying, no, I don't take it for granted that I can breathe in the air, and that my lungs will extract the oxygen and will expel the carbon dioxide, and that it will fill my body with what it needs until one can't breathe. And people in COVID and those who suffered and didn't even make it understand what breath is. So the other extinguisher of gratitude is to say, well, it's always been there, and therefore it will be there. So that's where we take for granted the love and the devotion of those who are closest to us, the people who help us, the people that we work with, because it's just there. It's part of the environment. And so the first thing that we do on the night of the Seder, where we want to feel a sense of gratitude to Hashem, we stop for a moment and say, not that the going out of Egypt, it's like part of Jewish psyche. We have a mitzvah to remember it every single day of our lives. So we have to start by saying, actually, that didn't have to happen. What if? Ilu lo hotzianu. What if God didn't take us out? Let's imagine a world as if there was no exodus from Egypt. Then we can start to begin that journey of what true gratitude is. And that's also part of our relationship with Hashem. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avot says in chapter 3, Mishnah 8, it says there, give Hashem what is from yours, because you and whatever you have belongs to Him. And it quotes from King David, who said, Ki mimcha hakol, from you Hashem is everything, and from your own we have given to you. So our sense of gratitude to Hashem is because without Him we would have nothing. We wouldn't have breath, we wouldn't have energy, we wouldn't have money, we wouldn't have family. So from there comes that sense, we're not entitled to this. Maybe none of this would have been. And from that gratitude then comes a sense of action. And it then occurred to me, this word ilu. Ilu in Hebrew is what if. The climax of the telling of the story of the going out of Egypt, right towards the end, when we hit the highest note, just before we say the three things that Rabban Gamliel says in summary we have to know, is Dayenu. Now, Dayenu, what is the key word in Dayenu? We focus on Dayenu. If you say, what is that? It's Dayenu. But the other word that appears just as often as Dayenu is Ilu. what if? The whole Dayenu is, what if this didn't happen? Imagine a world. It's in some ways, it's an outrageous composition, although it is so ancient that even our commentators from 1,000 years ago are commentating on Dayenu. It's part of who we are. It's ilu lo hotzianu. If Hashem had not taken us out, what then? What if he would have taken us out but not executed judgments on them? What if he would have taken us out but not split the sea? What if he would have taken us out and not given us manna? What happens if he would have not brought us to Mount Sinai and given us the Torah and given us Shabbos and given us the land of Israel? Ilu, what if? Then we say Dayenu, because the whole thing of Dayenu means it's enough. It doesn't mean could we say, Hashem, if you took us out but didn't give us the Torah, that would be enough. It doesn't mean it would have been enough for us. It means that's all we would have deserved, because Hashem didn't have to do it. And then what we essentially are doing, the whole of Dayenu is a what if. Imagine a world, and it's almost impossible to imagine. Imagine a world there was no exodus from Egypt. There was no miracles in the desert. There's no Shabbos, there's no Torah, there's no the land of Israel, there's no Jewish people. Imagine such a world. It's unimaginable. But in order to truly appreciate and feel gratitude for it, we have to imagine, because it could have been that none of that would have happened. And so we start the Seder with Ilu, the what if. We end that discussion with Ilu, what if, and then we feel that deep sense of Dayenu. Hashem, that it would be amazing. If you would just give us that, that's all we could say that we ultimately deserved. And now that you have given us Shabbos, Dayenu, we're so grateful to you. What a gift Shabbos is. Now that you have given us the Torah, Dayenu, can we imagine what life would be if we were not Jewish and we didn't have all of these things, and we didn't have community and family and a history and values and a sense of destiny and a sense of purpose? Could we imagine any of that? And what would the world look like? What would the world look like if the Jewish people had never existed? And there's an amazing quote that I just have to share with you from Paul Johnson in his book, The History of the Jews. And he does that thought experiment. He says, what if there would not have been a Jewish people in the world? Now, this is writing as a Catholic historian. He said, certainly the world without the Jews would have been a radically different place. Humanity might have eventually stumbled upon all the Jewish insights, but we cannot be sure. All the great conceptual discoveries of the human intellect seem obvious and inescapable once they have been revealed. See, it seems so obvious, these things, but that's only after they've been revealed. But it requires a special genius to formulate them for the first time. The Jews had this gift. It's the only mistake he makes here, because we didn't have it. Hashem gave it to us. That's what we're saying in Dayenu. But then listen what he says. To them we owe the idea of equality before the law, both divine and human, of the sanctity of life and the dignity of the human person, of the individual conscience and so a personal redemption, of collective conscience and so of social responsibility, of peace as an abstract ideal and love as the foundation of justice, and many other items which constitute the basic moral furniture of the human mind. All of the things that we today take for granted, where did they come from? They came from the Jewish people, which means they came from the Torah, they came from Hashem. And then he says, without Jews, it might have been a much emptier place. So there, Paul Johnson, as one of the foremost historians of modern times, is doing the thought experiment that the Haggadah did thousands of years ago. Ilu, what would have happened? Lo hotzianu, if God had not taken us out of Egypt, what would the world, no Jewish people, would have been an emptier place. And now that he has, we say Dayenu. We feel an inordinate, deep sense of gratitude. And that's why Dayenu is the pinnacle of the Haggadah in many respects, because it's that moment that we list all of the blessings and we say we don't take these for granted. They didn't have to be. We did not deserve them. Pesach means compassion. It doesn't mean Passover. We didn't deserve it. It didn't have to be like this. It could have been otherwise. And now that it has, what a gift that we have, and we feel that deep sense of gratitude. And we convert that gratitude from being simply the feeling of thank you, Hashem, to then taking responsibility. Indeed, if things could have been different and we didn't deserve it, then part of what we are doing now is to say, we know that history can turn in different ways. In our own personal lives and the history of nations, we know it can turn in different ways. And we have to have that same sense, what will tomorrow bring? How can we create the future that we want? Like the Jews in Egypt, maybe if they hadn't made the decisions that they did, they wouldn't have got out. It was the divine promises that saw them on the way out. But at the end of the Haggadah, what we do is not only say thank you, but we recommit ourselves. We have a sense of saying we will now take this forward, because the whole message of the Haggadah is, the word Haggadah comes from V'higadah telabincha, you will tell your children. Tell your children means we cannot let this story die. We cannot let this vision die. We cannot allow this story to stop here, so that the world will become empty of Am Yisrael, of the Jewish people. So we feel the gratitude. We also feel the sense of agency and the sense of responsibility. And with that, we celebrate Dayenu, thank you Hashem, and we go forward into the future with that sense of confidence. And so the Haggadah ends with the vision for the future redemption, Nishmat Kol Chai, the breath of every living being. We put the cup of wine for Eliyahu, signing the redemption and the Mashiach and the glorious future that lies ahead. And we feel saturated with gratitude, with fortitude, with confidence, and with a sense of joy and excitement for the future. Thank you so much.